So now let's get into learning objective 10.1 for today. The, the objective is to try to define human resource management and its strategic significance and explain how managers plan for their organization's human resources needs. So HRM, human resource management, by definition, is the set of organizational activities directed at attracting, developing, and maintaining an effective workforce. So, we talked about this earlier, but every organization has, as we said, a vision, a mission, and a strategic plan. So, here we want to look at the strategic importance of human resource management. Because, especially in the larger companies, every organization usually has like you have a strategic plan for the company. You also have a strategic HRM, or human resource management plan, because as I mentioned earlier, the human resources is basically the glue that keeps the organization together. So, human resources are the people comprising an organization's workforce. They're critical for effective organizational functioning. So, over the years, the importance of HRM has grown dramatically, due in part to the recognition, obviously, that human resources are the most valuable component for improving productivity and increasing today's awareness of the cost associated without good human resource planning and management. So, the effectiveness of HR performance associated directly with the strategic plan impacts the bottom line performance of the firm. Now, a lot of times we like to refer to our human resources, especially in 21st century thinking, as human capital. And why? Human capital is an investment in the organization. And what we do when we hire people, we look at them as an investment. We pay them a salary, but we want that investment to grow into profitability. So, human capital, by definition, reflects the organization's investment in attracting, retaining, and motivating an effective workforce. And a lot of times we heard of the buzzword, we've heard of talent management. Well, talent management recognizes that individuals, employees, represent a portfolio of talents that can be managed and used in ways best targeted for organizational success and ultimate profitability. So, we next go into identifying, and I'm following right along with the book here, what is human resource planning? Human resource planning is the starting point for attracting qualified new employees. So, let's start from square one. The first thing that we do when we want to hire someone, obviously, you say, well, we put out a job ad and we see how many people qualify for the job, potentially could qualify for the job. We interview a number of them, maybe in a Skype interview. um, or you can have a telephone conversation. And then we narrow down, we actually call them in to uh, the final list or the short list of candidates. We call them into an actual face-to-face interview. And then out of the finalists, we select the one that we think is going to be the best at the job. But we do all of that, strategically, we need to understand what it is that the organization needs to be successful. You know, we draw up a utopian type of wonderful um, outcomes for this one perfect candidate that we want to hire. But it's only good on paper if you have the right person, the right human capital, the right talent in order to meet the job description. So the first thing we're going to start out with is a job analysis. So by definition, a job analysis is a systematic analysis of jobs within an organization. So the job analysis results in number one, well, what is it that we actually need to maximize our outcomes? So we write a job description. And the job description lists the duties and responsibilities of a job, its surrounding working conditions, and the tools, materials, equipment, and information that are going to be used and necessary to perform that job. So the job description is one thing, and then we have the job specification. And the job specification lists, we talked about this before, KSAs, the skills and abilities that are needed and other credentials and qualifications to perform the job effectively. A job analysis is needed to develop appropriate selection methods, create relevant performance appraisal systems, and set equitable compensation systems. So, in summary, it's important that we have the right type of job, looking at what it is that we are looking for in the job, and what about the person? What are we looking for? The talent management, the human capital, and the person that fits the job. So the analysis is absolutely critical and essential here. The next thing is we want to forecast HR demand and supply. What is the pool of candidates out there that can fit the job description that we're looking for? What is the forecast on the supply of labor? Who do we have in-house, by the way, who could fit the job description? A lot of people that have worked their way up through the ranks, they have certain talents and abilities that we can't ignore before we go to the outside. If we go to the outside to hire someone, then we want to compare what we have with our in-house pool of candidates and what is the supply of those candidates and who will be available in the market to fit that job description. Now, when we forecast, we also use what we call replacement charts, skill inventories, and skill inventories. So what's a replacement chart? Replacement charts list each important managerial position. Who occupies that position? and how long that person will probably stay in that position before moving on to something else, whether internal or external to the company. Who is qualified now for the job, or who will soon be qualified down the road to move into it. Then we have the skills inventories. So, skills inventories are really employee information systems that they kind of look back at like what you would call a resume. They look at each employee's education, skills, work experience, and their career aspirations. And that's used to assist HR in identifying qualified employees when a position becomes available. And again, that's both internal and external. The other thing is when you look at the external supply of labor, it requires information from outside sources. There are many places you can go to get that information. You can look at the Department of Labor of the Bureau of Statistics, such as state employment commissions, government reports, and figures supplied by many colleges on the number of students that are needed for major fields. Finally, in Learning Objective 1, and following along in your book, what you want to do is you want to match HR supply and demand. You're looking at future demand and internal supply. Managers can make plans to manage predicted shortfalls or overstaffing. Hiring new employees, whether internal or external, and retaining present employees, and investing in productivity enhancing systems can help us meet our shortfalls. In other words, shortfalls relate to where you are in a company to where you want to be, or where you are in a position to where you want to be. So overstaffing can be handled by transferring employees sometimes and not necessarily replacing those who quit. You want to look at your selection pool, and for those that perhaps aren't going to be on board in the near future, offering early retirement, or maybe sometimes when you're overstaffed and you're scrapped for resources, you may have to lay off certain workers. Thinking back to the Great Recession, not that I can think back to it, I wasn't around then, many firms found it necessary to reduce the size of their workforce through layoffs. Others did not reduce their workforce, but reduced the number of hours each employee spent at work. Okay, so that is basically it for Learning Objective 1. So some of the takeaways here are that human resource management is a set of organizational activities that are directed at attracting, developing, and maintaining an effective workforce. Now, try not to confuse the difference between a job description and a job specification. A job description lists what you do in the job, including the duties and responsibilities. Excuse me. The job specification lists the skills and abilities you bring with you on the job. So when you forecast the supply of labor, you also want to remember that you include your internal as well as your external forecast. Okay, so what do employees need to move on internally, and what are they capable of doing at their present jobs or when they move on to another one? And the external forecast. If I don't have people in house that I need to fill a position, what is the supply of labor out there for that position? Okay, so that really is the end of phase two. Now I want you to reflect on this for 10 to 15 minutes.